My name is Claire Bennett. I'm 32 years old, and I've been dreading this family meeting for months. My siblings have always had a knack for making me feel small, subtle digs about my simple lifestyle, whispered comparisons when they thought I couldn't hear. What they didn't know was that the tech company I built from nothing had just sold for millions. I still drive a 10-year-old car. I still rent a modest loft. Not because I have to, because flashy things never define me. But today, their view of me is about to change. Dramatically. And the helicopter I arranged? That's just the warm-up. Before we get into the story, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. And hit like and subscribe if you've ever been underestimated by your own family. Trust me, you'll want to hear what happens next. Growing up as the middle child between my older brother, Michael, and my younger sister, Lauren, was never easy. Michael, now 40, was the golden boy, everything my parents valued wrapped up in one polished package. He took the Ivy League route, slid straight into an executive role at a Fortune 500 company, and somehow still found time to buy a vacation home in Nantucket. Family gatherings were basically his personal highlight reel. Lauren, 28, found her own fast track, marrying Daniel, heir to a regional banking empire. Her wedding was splashed across local society magazines, and now she spends her days organizing charity galas and sipping cocktails at the country club. My parents adored the picture-perfect life she built. And then, there was me, Claire, the one who never quite fit the mold. While Michael was winning leadership awards and Lauren was homecoming queen, I was running a small business designing custom websites for local shops. My parents called it a cute hobby and assumed I'd eventually trade it for a sensible job or a husband. When I told them I was skipping college to build my own company, they didn't just doubt me, they staged an intervention. My father, eyes fixed on his plate, said, "You'll regret this decision for the rest of your life." 10 years ago, I left our hometown of Brookhaven with $250 and a stubborn belief that my path was valid. They predicted I'd be back in 6 months, broke and ready to admit they'd been right. Instead, they invented their own version of my life, that I was barely scraping by, probably in some rundown apartment, clinging to failed business ideas. They had no idea that behind the struggle, I was building something that would change everything. The truth is, those first years nearly broke me. I burned through 2 failed startups. I came within days of bankruptcy, twice. I worked from coffee shops because my apartment was too small to hold a desk. Dinner was instant noodles more nights than I can count. But I refused to quit. In my 3rd year, a breakthrough came, a data security protocol I developed that made online protection affordable for small businesses. It caught the attention of industry leaders. Soon, my little tech firm, Bennett Secure Solutions, was signing contracts faster than I could hire staff. 3 years later, we were valued at over $50 million. And 6 months ago, a major tech corporation bought us out. I kept my position as head of the division. And a healthy amount of equity. I told no one in my family. Every holiday, I listened to their quiet pity, Michael offering to help with rent, Lauren handing me her outdated designer clothes. I simply thanked them, changed the subject, and went back to my life of travel, purpose, and yes, wealth. Because explaining my choices to people who only measured success in possessions felt pointless. Then came the call 3 weeks ago. Mom had fallen and broken her hip. Dad's early-stage dementia was getting worse. They needed care, and the kind that costs far more than their retirement savings could handle. Michael arranged a family meeting to figure out how we'd split the costs. His voice over the phone was polite but edged with judgment, as if I should just be grateful I'd be allowed to pitch in. As my flight descended toward Brookhaven's tiny regional airport, I wasn't just thinking about Mom and Dad. I was thinking about the role I'd played in this family for years, the underestimated one, the one they thought they had figured out, and whether I was finally ready to rewrite it. The morning of my flight, I stood in front of my closet in my downtown loft, scanning rows of sleek blazers and tailored dresses, and reaching for none of them. Instead, I pulled out a pair of faded jeans, a soft sweater with a tiny hole in the cuff, and sneakers that had seen better days. I tossed them into an old duffel bag, the kind you'd grab for a weekend road trip, not a corporate board meeting. My assistant, Mia, leaned against the doorway, eyeing me like I'd lost my mind. "You're worth $50 million, Claire. And you're dressing like a college kid going home for laundry." I smiled, tucking my hair into a simple ponytail. Because that's exactly how they expect me to look. Instead of the company jet, I booked a commercial flight, middle seat, coach. On the plane, I stared out the window, turning the question over in my mind. Why keep this act up? Why not walk in and tell them everything? Part of me liked being underestimated. In business, it gave me leverage. People showed their cards when they thought you couldn't match them. But with my family, it was deeper. Their judgment, their certainty that my path was a mistake. It had cut deeper than I ever admitted. Every time they told me to be more like Michael or Lauren, I stacked another brick in the wall I built around my real life. And now, I was about to walk right back into the house where that wall first went up, dressed in the uniform of the person they believed me to be. The taxi rolled down Main Street, past the same bakery where I used to work weekends, the same movie theater with its faded marquee, and the park where I once sat sketching out business ideas in a worn notebook. Brookhaven hadn't changed. My parents' white colonial house came into view, blue shutters, flower beds lining the front walk, and the big oak tree I used to climb when I wanted to be alone. It was like stepping into a memory, and a role I'd been cast in long before I had a say. Before I could knock, the door swung open. Michael stood there in a pressed sweater, slacks, and that subtle air of superiority he'd perfected over the years. He glanced at my duffel bag and smirked. "Finally. We thought maybe your bus broke down on the way from the airport." "Good to see you too, Michael," I said, forcing a smile. He led me inside, casually adding, "If you need help covering expenses while you're here, just let me know. I know taking time off work must be difficult." Translation: "We know you can't afford it." Dad was dozing in his recliner, thinner than I remembered. Mom moved carefully in the kitchen, wincing as she reached for a glass. Her eyes lit up when she saw me. "Claire, sweetheart. You look," she hesitated, searching for something nice to say. "Healthy. Are you eating enough on your budget?" I assured her I was fine and asked about her recovery. Michael hovered in the doorway, already holding a binder labeled Care Facility Options. Pages of cost breakdowns, charts, and rankings, his version of leadership. He spoke as if decisions were already made, his tone making it clear my role in this discussion would be minimal. And I let him think that. For now. Dinner that night was already set on the table when the doorbell rang. Michael's carefully arranged delivery, a roasted chicken, garlic mashed potatoes, fresh vegetables, artisan bread. Mom kept marveling at the spread, praising Michael for his generosity. He, of course, waved it off with a modest smile, as if he hadn't been waiting to hear those words all night. Then the door opened, and in swept Lauren. She looked like she'd walked straight out of a lifestyle magazine, cashmere dress, pearls, hair perfectly styled. Daniel trailed behind, juggling an armful of glossy shopping bags. "We're here," she announced, kissing Mom's cheek. "And we brought gifts." She handed Dad an expensive bottle of scotch, Mom a silk scarf, and Michael a leather portfolio. Then she turned to me, her smile tightening. "And for you, Claire." She pulled out a small bag and handed it over. Inside was a gift card to a mid-range clothing store. "I thought you could use this to refresh your wardrobe. Maybe something nice for interviews." The jab was subtle but intentional. I pocketed the card, managing a steady, "Thank you. Very thoughtful." "We all want to see you succeed," she replied, patting my arm in a way that felt more like a shove. The conversation turned into a highlight reel of their achievements: Michael's recent promotion, Lauren's charity gala, Daniel's country club golf win. When anyone mentioned me, it was with the soft, pitying tone you'd use for someone finding their way. Michael even offered to connect me with a few small business owners who needed basic websites, work he clearly saw as a favor to someone with no steady income. I smiled, nodded, and kept quiet. Every assumption they made was fuel. And by tomorrow, I'd be ready to light the match. The next morning, right at 9 a.m., Michael had transformed the living room into a corporate boardroom. His laptop sat open, connected to a portable projector, the first slide reading parental care options and financial considerations. Mom and Dad sat in their usual chairs, looking more like guests than the focus of the meeting. Lauren and Daniel matched in polished business casual, perched on the love seat. I got the wobbly ottoman in the corner, the kind of seat you give someone when you don't expect them to talk much. Michael clicked through slides of luxurious care facilities, detailing gourmet dining, manicured gardens, and state-of-the-art memory care programs. His top pick was an exclusive new community with independent living apartments and a private golf course for Dad. Mom murmured that it looked lovely, but I caught the shadow of concern in her eyes when the numbers appeared. This is the gap between their retirement income and the actual costs, Michael said, pointing to the figure at the bottom of the slide. That's what we, as a family, need to cover. Daniel leaned forward. Lauren and I can cover 40%. I can handle 45% with my bonuses, Michael added, clearly pleased with himself. That leaves about $1,200 a month. Claire, we figured you could cover that. Or, if that's too much, maybe $500. We can adjust to cover the rest. The words dripped with the kind of generosity that assumes you're drowning. Lauren added softly, if money's tight, you could always help in other ways. Visiting more, doing some of the personal care. Mom chimed in with concern. Do you even have a steady job right now, dear? Before I could speak, Michael jumped in. Actually, my company has an entry-level marketing position opening up. Modest pay, but it'd be good for someone in your situation. I could feel the heat rising in my face, not from shame, but from the sheer disbelief that after 10 years, they still saw me as a charity case. I sat back, smiled politely, and said, before we finalize anything, I just need to make a quick call. Michael sighed, clearly irritated. Claire, can this wait? We're in the middle of important family business. I ignored him and stepped toward the window, phone to my ear. Mia, it's me. Are we good for today? I listened for a beat, then smiled. Perfect. Go ahead with the arrival in 15 minutes. Yes, the lawn will be fine. I ended the call and turned back to the room. Sorry about that. Just confirming my transportation. Lauren tilted her head, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Another taxi? Not exactly, I said, settling back into my seat. Before we get too deep into those care facility options, I actually have one to suggest. Michael waved me off. Claire, I've researched every top-rated facility in the region. If it's worth considering, it's on my list. This one wouldn't be, I replied evenly. It's invitation only, through a private foundation. The best memory care program in the state. Lauren smirked. And how would you know about that? Because, I said, my voice calm but steady, I funded it. The Westbrook Senior Health Foundation is my project. Silence. Michael blinked. Lauren laughed once, sharp and dismissive. Right. And next you'll tell us you own a yacht. Before I could respond, the distant thump of rotor blades filled the air, growing louder by the second. The windows rattled. Mom sat up, startled. What on earth is that? I glanced out the window, just as a sleek black helicopter descended onto the front lawn, blades churning the air, bending the grass flat. I stood, slinging my duffel over my shoulder. That, I said evenly, would be my ride. All eyes were on me, but no one moved. Michael finally found his voice. What do you mean your ride? I walked to the door, pausing just long enough to meet his stare. You said yesterday, I probably couldn't even afford a car. You're right. I don't own one. I opened the door as the helicopter's engine idled, the pilot waving in recognition. But I prefer something a little faster. Mom's hand flew to her mouth. Lauren gripped Daniel's arm so tightly his knuckles turned white. Dad's eyebrows shot up like he'd just heard the punchline to the world's most expensive joke. I stepped outside into the wind, my hair whipping across my face as I approached the aircraft. Over my shoulder, I called, when Mom wakes up from the shock, tell her I'll be back in an hour. We can finish this conversation at my place. There's room for all of you. The pilot opened the door for me, helping me inside. As the blade spun up, I glanced back. My family still stood frozen in the doorway, their expressions a perfect mix of disbelief, confusion, and, finally, curiosity. The helicopter lifted off, the town shrinking below us. The pilot handed me a headset. "Everything all right, Ms. Bennett? You look like you just dropped a bomb back there." I smiled. "Just family stuff, Rick. Sometimes you've got to make an entrance they'll never forget." The flight to my property was short, but it gave me enough time to let the adrenaline settle. Below us, the hills rolled out like a green quilt, the early sun casting long, soft shadows across the fields. Then, through the trees, my estate came into view. 30 acres of manicured gardens, a private lake glinting in the light, and the historic stone mansion I'd restored to perfection. Rick angled the helicopter toward the circular helipad beside the main house. From up here, the place looked like something out of a magazine: 10 bedrooms, a glass-walled library, and guest cottages tucked into the trees. The kind of home my family never would have imagined me setting foot in, let alone owning. Mia was already waiting when we landed, tablet in one hand, sunglasses in the other. She didn't even flinch at the rotor wash. "How'd the big reveal go?" she asked, handing me a bottle of water. "About as expected," I said, stepping down onto the pad. Mom nearly fainted. Michael looked like someone told him the stock market shut down permanently. "And Lauren?" Mia asked, smirking, clutching Daniel like the helicopter might abduct her. She laughed, then switched to business. "Chef's got lunch ready. Guest suites are prepped in case they stay. And the family portfolio is in your office. Everything from the care plan to the trust documents." "Perfect," I said. "They'll be here within the hour. Let's make sure their first impression lingers." As I crossed the stone path toward the front steps, I glanced back at the helipad. Soon, that same helicopter would be bringing my family here, and for the first time in years, I'd have their full attention. An hour later, the low thump of rotor blades signaled their arrival. I stepped out onto the terrace just as the helicopter descended over the lake, sending ripples across the water. When the doors opened, my family hesitated before stepping out, as if the air here might be different. Mom clutched her purse to her chest. Dad's eyes moved slowly over the property, his usual haze replaced by quiet wonder. Michael and Lauren. They didn't say a word, but their faces said everything: shock, disbelief, maybe even a little awe. "Welcome to my home," I said simply, gesturing toward the mansion's front doors. Inside, the grand foyer rose 2 stories high, sunlight streaming through arched windows onto polished marble floors. A crystal chandelier swayed slightly from the helicopter's downdraft, and the scent of fresh flowers filled the space. This is yours?" Mom asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," I said, leading them deeper inside. "I bought it 6 months ago when I decided to establish a regional office here." Michael finally spoke. "Regional office of what?" I stopped in the center of the living room, the garden and lake visible through the glass walls behind me. "Bennett Secure Solutions, my company. The one I founded 8 years ago." Michael blinked like he hadn't heard me right. Lauren glanced at Daniel, her jaw tightening. 6 months ago, Nexus Technologies acquired us for just over $50 million. I continued, my tone calm but unshakable. "I still run the division. I still hold equity. And yes, I could cover Mom and Dad's care for the rest of their lives without blinking." Silence settled in the room. It wasn't the stunned, chaotic kind from the lawn. It was heavier, more personal. They weren't just processing numbers. They were realizing just how wrong they'd been about me for years. I crossed to the coffee table, where Mia had placed a leather-bound portfolio. "This," I said, opening it, "is the care plan I've already arranged for Mom and Dad." Inside were the trust documents in their names, the full contract with the Westbrook Senior Health Foundation, and the legal framework ensuring their care would never depend on anyone else's approval or contribution. Lauren leaned forward, scanning the papers. You set all of this up already." 3 weeks ago, When I got the call about Mom's hip, I replied. While you were researching facilities and debating monthly contributions, I'd already secured the best option available. And yes, it's the same foundation I told you about yesterday, the one I fund. Michael's voice was low, almost grudging. You did all this without telling us. Yes, I said, meeting his eyes. Because I knew exactly what would happen. You'd want control. You'd question my judgment. And you'd expect me to prove myself worthy of being involved in the decision-making. Today's meeting confirmed it. Mom's eyes were wet. We never meant to make you feel like you weren't capable. Maybe not intentionally, I said softly, but every gift card for basic clothes, every suggestion I take an entry-level job, every sideways comment about my choices. It sent the same message. You assumed I'd failed. Lauren shifted uncomfortably. We were trying to help. Were you? I asked, holding her gaze. Or was it easier to believe your way was the only way to succeed? The room went quiet. For the first time, I could see them actually sitting with my words instead of deflecting. The shock of the helicopter had cracked the surface. Now, the truth was sinking in. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Michael leaned back, exhaling slowly. I owe you an apology, Claire. That alone was shocking. Michael rarely admitted fault. I made assumptions about you because if your path worked, it meant I might have chosen wrong. I did everything our family expected, school, career, money, and I still hate at least 60% of my life. But if I admitted that, then what was it all for? Mom's head snapped toward him. Michael, you never said, because saying it out loud would make it real, he interrupted. It was easier to believe you were the one who missed the mark. Lauren shifted in her seat, twisting her wedding ring. I get it. My life looks perfect on Instagram, but Daniel and we've been in counseling for a year. The galas, the parties, it all feels like I'm performing, not living. And watching you succeed without any of that. She trailed off, her eyes wet. It's unsettling. Daniel took her hand. We've been rethinking a lot lately. The house, the status. All of it. Their honesty caught me off guard. For years, I'd imagined them looking down on me from a place of absolute certainty. But maybe, deep down, they'd been clinging to their own illusions just as much as I had been guarding mine. So we've all been wearing masks, I said quietly. Mine just happened to be a little more convincing. The mood in the room had shifted. It wasn't vindication anymore. It was the beginning of something else. Something we'd never really had before, honesty. Dad, who'd been quietly listening, finally looked at me with surprising clarity. Claire, did you keep all this from us to punish us for not believing in you? The question landed like a weight. I let out a breath. At first, no. In the early years, I stayed quiet because I wasn't sure it would last. And later, it became habit, protection. But if I'm being honest, yes, part of me wanted the moment where you'd all have to see how wrong you'd been. Lauren gave me a faint smile. That helicopter entrance was dramatic. I laughed softly. Not my most mature moment. But after Michael told me, I probably couldn't even afford a car. Something in me snapped. It wasn't about showing off. It was about breaking the story you've been telling yourselves about me. Michael rubbed the back of his neck. Yeah. I deserved that. He glanced at Mom. Although the fainting part, I was overwhelmed. Mom cut in, still a little pink. Finding out your daughter is a millionaire is not a Tuesday kind of surprise. Daniel muttered, almost to himself, multimillionaire, then looked sheepish when all eyes turned his way.
Sorry.
Banker reflex. We all laughed, but beneath it, the air felt different, lighter. Not because they finally knew the truth about my bank account, but because we were starting to talk about more than just money. I closed the portfolio and looked around the room.
All right.
Now that the air is clear, let's talk about what actually matters, Mom and Dad's care. For the first time since I'd walked into this house, Michael didn't immediately take the lead. He leaned back, letting me speak. The Westbrook Foundation facility isn't just a building, it's a community. Small, home-like residences.
Personalized care plans.
Programs built around dignity and independence, not just safety and efficiency. I've already secured a spot for them there whenever they're ready. The trust covers every expense, permanently. Lauren rested her chin on her hand. It's nothing like the places we toured yesterday. It feels human. Michael nodded slowly. And you've done all this without asking for anyone's approval. Because it wasn't about me proving anything to you, it was about giving them the best life possible. This isn't my decision alone, though. We're still a family. I want us all to have a say in the timing, the move, and how we stay involved. Dad smiled faintly. Equals. Exactly, I said. It was strange hearing Michael say it out loud, but he repeated it. Equals. And this time, it didn't sound like a courtesy. It sounded like a shift. For years, I'd been the struggling one, the afterthought in big decisions. Now, the table felt level. We moved into the sunroom, coffee cups in hand, the late morning light spilling across the floor. The conversation shifted. No more passive-aggressive remarks. No more quiet digs. Michael cleared his throat. Seeing what you've built, it's made me think. I've been offered a teaching position at the business school. It pays less, but I think I'd actually enjoy it. I smiled. You've always been a natural teacher. Maybe it's time you did something for yourself. Lauren glanced at Daniel before speaking. I'm stepping back from the endless charity galas. I want to put my time into something that actually matters. If your foundation has room for volunteers, I'd like to help. We could use someone with your eye for detail, I said genuinely. There's an arts program there that would be perfect for you. Daniel leaned forward. And I've been thinking about shifting my client base to nonprofits and ethical investments. It won't make as much, but it would feel better. Mom was smiling in that way she used to when we were little, like we'd surprised her in the best possible way. Dad sat quietly, watching us, but the focus in his eyes told me he was fully present for this moment. For the first time in years, the conversation wasn't about status or proving ourselves. It was about building lives we actually wanted to live. That evening, we sat around the long dining table in the estate's West Wing. Chef had prepared roasted salmon with fresh herbs, lemon risotto, and a dessert tray that could have come from a five-star hotel. But for once, the food wasn't the main event, the conversation was. No one was reciting promotions, bragging about social events, or comparing bank accounts. Instead, we swapped stories, small human stories. Dad talked about the time he tried to build a treehouse for us and nearly fell through the half-finished floor. Mom told the one about my first business as a kid, charging neighbors a quarter to see my pet rabbit in the backyard. Even Michael laughed at himself, recounting how he'd once been locked out of his own high-rise apartment in gym shorts. I realized how long it had been since we'd shared a meal without judgment hanging in the air. Later, as the candles burned low, Mom reached for my hand. You know, Claire, I feel like I'm meeting the real you for the first time in years. I squeezed her hand. That's because I've been hiding behind a wall I didn't even know I built. But maybe it's time to stop doing that. We lingered at the table long after dessert was gone, none of us in a hurry to leave. The mansion didn't feel like a stage anymore. It felt like a place where we could start fresh. The next morning, sunlight poured into the breakfast room. Chef had outdone himself, fresh pastries, gourmet omelets, coffee that smelled like a promise. But the mood was relaxed, easy. There was laughter, real conversation, and none of the tension that had once made family gatherings feel like minefields. When it was time for them to leave, I walked everyone out to the terrace. The helicopter was already waiting, blades turning lazily in the morning air. Mom hugged me tightly. Will you come for Sunday dinner next week? Nothing fancy. Just family. I'd love that, I said, meaning it. One by one, they climbed aboard. I watched as the helicopter lifted into the sky, carrying them back to their lives that, after this weekend, might not look quite the same. I stood there for a long moment, the quiet settling in around me. The helicopter had made an unforgettable entrance, sure. It had shattered the story they'd been telling about me for years. But that wasn't the victory. The Real win was sitting at a table with my family and feeling, for the first time in a decade, like we actually saw each other. True wealth, I realized, isn't measured in estates or bank accounts. It's in the connections where you can be fully yourself, without fear of being misunderstood. And if you've ever been underestimated by family, by friends, remember this. You don't have to prove them wrong to live the life you want. But sometimes, showing them who you really are can change everything.